Hey, friends. Hello. Welcome to Tuesdays with Tina. We are live on April 8th, 2025. Happy to see you guys here. I've got Instagram and YouTube streaming live right now. And it's always a fun time when we've got our live sessions going on. Last week, I did a pre recorded one talking about different syringes, qualities of different syringes. So if you missed that one, that pre recorded one is on YouTube and you can look that up. But today, what I want to talk to you all about is a common question that I am asked regularly about giving injections. You guys ask me this. You send me emails. You send me messages through social media, through my continuing education courses. Anytime I present a series, oftentimes I'm asked, why is my patient's cheek swelling up when I'm giving an injection? And I get this question if it's a maxillary injection, if it's a mandibular injection. I've had organizations reach out to me, like dental organizations who have clinicians who give an injection and their patient has a very swollen cheek or like their lips become droopy. So let's talk about the reasons why that happens. And it's all about technique. So what ends up happening is whatever injection you're doing, whether it's a maxillary injection, generally it's a PSA that somebody's doing, or a mandibular injection like an IA or a Gauge-Gates, your technique, when this happens, technique is off. The placement of the injection, the placement of the needle is too far out into the cheek, and you're inserting into the parotid gland. Remember, the parotid gland, that's right there. The parotid gland is right there. So you want to be aware of that and you want to be able to understand that. So when you're doing your PSA injection, for example, when you're doing your PSA injection, what you want to be aware of is palpating, and you want to be out into the mucobuccal fold. What happens, people go too far into the cheek and you think that you're angled towards the maxilla. And I'm trying to think of, I don't have my skull right here. I might have to, hold on, let me go grab my skull so you can see this. Hang tight, friends, hang tight. Okay, thanks for hanging tight. So what ends up happening is when you're doing a maxillary injection like a PSA, we got Mr. Skull here, the insertion, instead of being near the maxillary alveolar process and angled that way. So let's see if I can put all the different angles out so you guys can see. Okay, come around this way. So you can see how it's angled away from, I know this is kind of a posterior view, but you see how it's, the needle is pointed towards the maxilla. If it's pointed straight up or out, you're going to get into the buccal mucosa. And then what ends up happening is you get into the parotid gland. Now, anytime we inject into the parotid gland, we have the facial nerve that runs right through that. So we get into the parotid, we get the facial nerve. The patient is going to have some facial nerve temporary paralysis, right? They're going to have a little look like Bell's palsy because we've anesthetized that facial nerve. Same thing happens when we do the infraorbital foramen, the infraorbital injection, or a nice and deep MSA and ASA injection. Sometimes that facial nerve right through here will become numb as well, and the patient will get a little droopy face. But if our angulation is off on that PSA, we get down to the cheek, we get into the parotid gland. Now, with our mandibular injections, what ends up happening is instead of being right over those premolars and aiming for our bony target, people are out into the cheek too much. So they're out right there, pointing the tip of the needle into the cheek instead of staying nice and close to that pterygomandibular raphe. So you're too far away from the raphe. You're not contacting bone. Reasons why we contact bone with our mandibular injections, so that we know that we're not in the parotid gland. Very common thing that ends up happening with our mandibular blocks is people their angulation is off. They don't contact bone. They go ahead and deposit. The patient's cheek swells up. Their lip gets droopy. You've got facial nerve paralysis. The parotid gland becomes inactive because now you've anesthetized the parotid gland. So That's the problem, more than likely the reason why. Now, when I get these questions, it's hard for me to know without seeing your technique. I really is. I have to see your technique to be able to see that. That's where the beauty of hands-on workshops and such like that come into play. Now, if you want to see that more in action, I describe this in detail in my book, in my Hit Me With Your Best Shot book. And in the book, there's video links so you can see these injections a lot more. Of course, in my on-demand CE course, I go in great detail into all of that as well. So if you want more detailed information and get some CE credit, you can hit that up. But keys to remember: palpate the maxillary process. Make sure that you have that angulation 45 degrees towards the maxilla and that you are not too far out into the buccal mucosa. Stay at the height of that mucogingival junction, right? Alveolar process, mucogingival junction, cheek. We want to be up here. For our mandibular injections, palpate. Feel for the bone. Make sure that you're coming at a contralateral location, aiming for that bone, nice and close to that pterygomandibular raphe. Okay, someone just asked a question. Are you doing a hands-on workshop in Wisconsin at all? I would love to do a hands-on workshop in Wisconsin. I would love it, would love it, would love it. Let's connect up, see if we can make something happen. If you are an organization or if you know of an organization, whether it's a dental organization, private dental office, a continuing education, association, study club that wants something like that happen, send me a message and I'm happy to see how we can make that happen. Okay. Totally happy to see how I can make that happen. Pretty much my year is filled with Oregon and Georgia right now with workshops, but yes, let's make that happen. Okay. Absolutely. All right, friends. I hope that helps. I hope that helps you. Save this for your future reference. Go to YouTube, tag it, save it, share it as a reference as to if you're ever curious as to why. That's probably why. That's probably why. And it's avoidable. It's completely avoidable. You got to understand your anatomy, evaluate the anatomy, palpate for the bone, be aware the parotid gland. It's very close to where we're going. And that facial nerve runs through there. So if we anesthetize it, it's going to get blocked up. Thank you all so much for joining in. Thank you for sending your questions in. I love it. I have more questions that come through all the regular time. Somebody said, what was the question? The question was, why is the cheek swelling up, getting firm, and lips getting droopy, not numb, but droopy, non-functional when I give injections? And it's injections from the PSA injection to our mandibular injections. So to recap, you're getting into the parotid gland. So thank you. All right, friends, that's your Tuesdays with Tina. Again, last week, I did a compare and contrast of all these different anesthetic syringes. Did that as a pre-recorded one. You can see that on YouTube. And all these previous Tuesdays with Tina and more coming up. This April is going to be a busy week. Lots of certification courses going on. I was in Georgia last week and doing a certification course, and I've got 2 certification courses here in Oregon coming up this next week and the week after, and lots of good fun stuff. Got to work with Today's RDH for their live CE a few weeks ago, and those are always fun. I love doing those live virtual CEs, and if you like on-demand CEs, come and check things out. I'll make sure I put links to stuff. I'm really bad at putting those in there, but if you go to my website, teachertinardh.com, you'll see all that stuff too. All right, friends, have a great afternoon, evening, and I'll see you next time. Bye.